webinar on navigating US compliance in 2025. How can global employers adapt to policy shifts? My name is Paula Ellard and I'll be your host. So in today's session, we'll explore some of the biggest compliance challenges facing businesses in the US and what global employers need to do to stay ahead. So with increasing regulatory shifts, enforcement, priorities and evolving labour laws, compliance is more complex than ever. So in today's discussion, it's all about helping you navigate these changes with confidence. So we have two incredible speakers who will share their experience on compliance trends, risk mitigation strategies, and how companies can simplify their global expansion. So I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker. So Arjun. Arjun is the Assistant General Counsel at Atlas, where he leads the employment law team throughout the Americas. He provides strategic legal guidance to businesses on workplace policies, employee relations and risk mitigation, helping companies stay compliant across multiple jurisdictions. As an employment lawyer with extensive experience in labour law, regulatory deployments and workplace investigations, Arjun has worked closely with companies to navigate complex employment challenges, including terminations, worker classifications, and compliance with evolving legal frameworks. So today he'll walk us through the key compliance trends shaping 2025, recent and upcoming policy shifts, and the enforcement risks that employers need to be aware of. So with that, Arjun, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Paula. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. As Paul's mentioned, my name is Arjun Dhir. I truly appreciate you taking the time today to join us to examine the latest compliance trends, regulatory changes, and enforcement priorities shaping the business landscape throughout the United States in 2025 and beyond. This presentation will cover the key government agencies affected by these changes, look at the business implications, and share a proactive strategy to help you stay ahead of these regulatory changes. But before we dive into the details, let me give you a quick roadmap of today's discussion. My portion of the discussion will focus on four key areas. First, we'll examine recent compliance developments under the new Trump administration and how they're shaping the legal and regulatory landscape for businesses. Next, we'll shift our focus to anticipated employment law changes that may impact U.S. businesses in the coming months and years. We'll then look at key enforcement priorities for major labor agencies, discussing what these priorities mean for companies and the risk they may pose. Finally, I'll share some compliance strategies for multinational businesses. I'll offer practical, actionable steps to stay ahead of these regulatory changes and ensure compliance. So with that roadmap in mind, let's get started with the first topic, a deep dive into the most recent compliance developments under the Trump administration. So as we enter 2025, we are seeing significant changes in labor and employment regulations under the new Trump administration. The administration has quickly begun shaping its labor policy agenda, resulting in notable shifts across key federal agencies responsible for employment law enforcement. These changes reflect a clear pro-business stance, prioritizing deregulation, reducing union influence, and easing compliance burdens for employers. So let's break down some of the most impactful shifts, starting with the National Labor Relations Board, or the NLRB. So the first major move affecting the NLRB was President Trump's dismissal of two officials, including board member Gwynne Wilcox. This action temporarily eliminated the board's quorum, meaning the NLRB cannot issue new decisions until a new board member was confirmed. The administration justified these dismissals as a way to realign the agency's approach to labor law enforcement and create a more employer-friendly regulatory environment. However, in the short term, this loss of quorum has disrupted the NLRB's ability to resolve ongoing labor disputes, leading to uncertainty for businesses and unions alike. So the next impact is in regards to unions. Building on trends from his first term, President Trump's administration is pushing a wave of pro-business rulings that impact unions and collective bargaining rights. With a solid Republican majority on the NLRB, recent rulings favor employers when employees attempt to unionize. For example, the board has overturned the Obama-era specialty healthcare standard, making it harder for unions to unionize with smaller bargaining units within a company. Additionally, the NLRB has reinstated policies that allow employers to exercise more control over workplace organizing efforts, further limiting union influence. Another major change is how businesses are held accountable for labor violations in contractor and franchise relationships. Under previous administrations, if a subcontractor or a franchisee violated labor laws, the larger parent company would be held responsible under the joint employer rule. However, the NLRB has recently reversed this rule, making it harder to hold parent companies liable for the actions of their franchisees or contractors. This is a major win for franchisors or corporations, as it shields them from union bargaining efforts and labor-related lawsuits. So, like in summary, the NLRB rulings have really tilted the balance of power towards employers, limiting union organizing efforts and reducing corporate liability and subcontractor relationships. So now let's turn our focus to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or the EEOC, which enforces federal anti-discrimination laws in the workplace. This is very similar to the NLRB, as there's a major shift that occurred in the commission when President Trump took power, as he almost immediately took the step of removing two Democratic commissioners on the EEOC, Charlotte Burrows and Jocelyn Samuels. While it's not unusual for a president to take such action, this was an unprecedented move, as no president had recently dismissed these commissioners before their terms expired. These dismissals, it's pretty obvious that they paralyzed the ability for this commission to enforce workplace discrimination laws, as the commission now lacks minimum number of members needed to make official decisions. Similar to the NLRB, without a quorum, the commission cannot issue major rulings, initiate large-scale investigations, or create new enforcement policies. This means employers may see fewer discrimination lawsuits in the near term, but the lack of oversight also increases uncertainty in compliance expectations. So going beyond the leadership changes, we're also seeing a clear shift in how the commission handles workplace discrimination cases. Rather than focusing on large-scale systematic discrimination investigations, the commission is prioritizing individual discrimination claims. So in practicality, this means fewer class action lawsuits initiated by the commission, more reliance on mediation and settlements to resolve workplace disputes, and less aggressive federal oversight, shifting the burden to businesses to self-regulate. So this change reduces compliance risk for business in the short term, but also creates some legal uncertainty as the case law will continue to develop with this new regime. Another major regulatory shift has come from the Department of Labor, which governs wage laws and worker protections. We anticipate that the Trump administration will likely make it easier for businesses to classify workers as independent contractors rather than employees. But you might ask, why does this matter? Well, independent contractors don't receive benefits like overtime pay, unemployment insurance, or employer-sponsored healthcare. Businesses save on labor costs because they are not required to provide these benefits to contractors. However, many workers who might have been classified as employees under previous regimes have now lost access to these protections. This shift is particularly predominant in industries like trucking, delivery services, and app-based gig work like Uber or DoorDash, where contractors are especially prevalent. For businesses, these changes provide much greater workplace flexibility, but they also increase the risk of legal challenges over worker misclassification because there's been such a rapid change of what's expected, and it's a lot of uncertainty even from our standpoint of what makes a contractor versus what makes an employee. Lastly, let's talk about deregulation, which, as you can tell from what I just spoke about, has been a central theme across all the labor agencies. So broadly, the Trump administration has taken steps to reduce federal oversight on businesses, continuing a trend from his first term. Key aspects of deregulatory agenda include scaling back workplace safety investigations, reducing compliance reporting requirements, and limiting enforcement actions for labor law violations. The goal of deregulation is to give businesses more flexibility in hiring, wage decisions, and workplace policies while reducing compliance costs. While this obviously benefits employers by lowering the administrative burden, it also creates uncertainty as individual states may put their hand up now and introduce stricter labor laws to fill in the gap left by federal deregulation. I'm going to move to the next slide, Paula. This has been a topic that's been really hotly debated. It's one of the most widely discussed changes under the Trump administration involving scrutiny of corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Over the past few months, the Trump administration has taken decisive steps to roll back DEI-related mandates, shifting federal policy away from race and gender-based initiatives more towards a merit-based approach. These changes have significant legal and compliance implications for businesses, particularly those that contract with the federal government or operate in states where DEI policies are being actively challenged. So let's break this down further, starting with the federal actions and look at how they may impact DEI in your workplace. So this all started with one of the most notable policy shifts in January of this year when President Trump signed an executive order aiming at eliminating race and gender-based considerations in federal contracting, hiring, and workplace training programs. The order he signed restricts federal agencies and contractors from implementing DEI initiatives that explicitly consider protected characteristics such as race, gender, or sexual orientation. The Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division has specifically been instructed to investigate and penalize organizations that do not comply with this order. This raises significant legal consideration for businesses that contract with the federal government, particularly those with already established DEI hiring promotions or supplier diversity programs. So stemming from these policy shifts, we're seeing a growing wave of state-level pushback on diversity-focused hiring and training initiatives. And this isn't just rhetoric. Several states have already enacted legislation restricting or banning certain DEI practices in public institutions, and similar efforts are gaining traction in the private sector. There have been a lot of concerns about reverse discrimination and the legality of certain DEI practices that have led to challenges and policy changes. For example, in Q1 of this year, we've seen high-profile lawsuits filed against companies alleging that their DEI initiatives create discriminatory hiring practices against racial groups, particularly white and Asian applicants. In response, we've seen big corporations in the private sector like McDonald's, Target, and Pepsi. They've begun reevaluating and discontinuing DEI initiatives to ensure compliance and reduce legal risks. Many organizations are shifting their diversity strategies towards socioeconomic factors rather than those that focus on race or gender. So to wrap this section up, what are the implications for employers? Well, these recent changes have created challenges to affirmative action policies, forcing companies to reassess their diversity strategies. We've seen that many companies are now walking a tightrope. On one hand, they want to maintain their commitment to diversity, but they really want to avoid legal pitfalls. The heightened risk of litigation surrounding DEI initiatives. There is a heightened risk of litigation surrounding DEI initiatives, particularly involving those with quotas based on protected characteristics. So you need to really implement transparency and data-driven decision making to mitigate legal risk. So let's move on to prognosticating now. This is where we kind of looked at what the trends are. We looked at Trump's last administration and kind of what he said and what's happening in the last first few months, and we'll make some predictions on what we see happening as we move forward. So with this new administration, we often see shifts in employment law. So let's examine three of the key areas where it's expected. The first relates to the Fair Labor Standards Act. So under the Biden administration, the Department of Labor expanded overtime protections by lowering the salary exemption threshold, making employees eligible for overtime pay. The Trump administration expects to reverse this change. Increases in salary thresholds for exempt employees are anticipated, which will affect who qualifies for overtime exemptions. While Biden's proposed increases have already been scaled back in 2024, we still expect to see some adjustment to the salary threshold, requiring employers to reclassify employees or increase salaries to maintain exemption status. The rollback is aimed at reducing labor costs for businesses and allowing greater flexibility in workplace management. But with the change, there will be a change that we anticipate. So employers need to prepare for these changes by conducting a thorough review of their employee classifications and keeping a budget available for potential salary adjustments. In terms of independent contractors, the Biden administration imposed stricter classification criteria, extending employment protections to gig workers. But as we discussed previously, we anticipate that the Trump administration will return to a more lenient classification, allowing businesses greater leeway in classifying workers as independent contractors. But despite the relaxed regulatory environment, we do think that there will be a step up in enforcement efforts based on what we've heard Trump speak about, particularly in targets where misclassification is prevalent, such as construction, transportation, or healthcare. The stricter enforcement of this classification could lead to increased penalties for misclassification. And lastly, the Biden administration had advocated for raising the federal minimum wage to $15 per hour. However, the Trump administration has already taken the opposite stance. They've argued that wage floors should be determined at state and local levels. So we expect to see continued wage disparities across states, which may pose compliance challenges for multi-state employers like ourselves. So these regulatory changes translate into specific enforcement priorities and compliance risks for employers, which require proactive risk management strategies. So let's look at the key agencies and their focus areas. So we anticipate that the Department of Labor's enforcement efforts will focus on wage and hour law compliance, ensuring employers properly pay their employees. The Department of Labor is particularly interested in industries with a history of wage and hour violations, such as restaurants, retail, and construction. As we discussed, we anticipate that workplace misclassification penalties will be a significant risk, as the Department of Labor is generally quite tough on businesses that misclassify employees as independent contractors because they avoid paying taxes and benefits. The DOL also has increased the number of wage and hour investigators and is conducting more targeted audits of businesses in high-risk industries. So employers need to look out for the heightened risk of audits and the penalties for non-compliance. Employers should consider being proactive and look at compliance strategies to avoid these costly violations. So this includes implementing robust internal controls, conduct regular self-audits, and train managers on wage and hour compliance to ensure that they're actually meeting the standards that the government sets. Recent leadership changes have led to a shift in the NLRB's enforcement priorities. We anticipate that the NLRB is expected to focus on more traditional labor relations issues, including union representation and collective bargaining rights. While we expect the Labor Relations Board to be more employer-friendly, it's still important for companies to comply with labor laws to avoid any accusations of unfair labor practices. So given these challenges and risks, let's discuss some best practices for businesses to ensure compliance and mitigate potential legal liabilities. Proactive compliance is not just a cost-saving measure, it's an investment into your company's reputation and long-term success. So first, you want to align your wage and hour policies with the FLSA rules. So regularly review your overtime and minimum wage policies to ensure they align with the latest federal and state laws. You're going to want to make necessary updates to employee classifications to avoid wage violations. In the same ilk, you want to ensure proper worker classification. You're going to want to carefully review job roles to determine whether workers should be classified as employees or independent contractors. Remember that misclassification can lead to hefty lawsuits and fines, so it's really crucial to get that differentiation right. You're going to want to conduct regular compliance audits. This means performing internal audits to identify any areas of risk before they attract regulatory attention. You're going to want to continue monitoring the evolving regulatory framework. So keep an eye on new laws and regulations that apply to your business on all levels, all federal, state, and local. These legislative changes can happen quickly, especially in the Trump regime. So having a process to track them is essential. And you're going to want to update your HR and legal training. This will ensure that your HR teams, managers, and leaderships understand the latest employment laws and best practices. A well-trained workforce reduces the risk of non-compliance and employee disputes because there's a whole group of people who can actually identify issues before they arise. And don't wait for a legal issue to arise, ideally. You'd want to proactively consult with an employment law expert to stay compliant and avoid lawsuits. Legal guidance can help navigate complex workplace regulations before they become an issue. So to wrap up, we've covered key regulatory shifts under the Trump administration, including changes to the FLSA, worker classification rules, increased enforcement risks. The key takeaway is that we're living in a rapidly evolving employment landscape. Compliance is not optional, it's absolutely essential for protecting your business. And we live in an information age with access to all types of great resources. So staying apprised of issues, having great legal guidance is probably the best way to avoid any types of issues. So as we discussed, you're going to want to address potential issues early before they become costly violations. Keep monitoring legal and regulatory changes to adapt your policies accordingly. And keep attending webinars like this to stay apprised of further developments. And you can reach out to local law firms and even our organization to help you kind of guide you through the legal landscape.
That's great, Arjun. Thank you for those insights. It's clear that staying ahead of compliance in 2025 will require businesses to be proactive and adaptable in their approach. So next up, we have Landon Smallwood, who will talk us through how businesses can simplify global compliance using an employer of record solution. Landon is our mid-market sales manager at Atlas, specializing in helping businesses scale their global operations seamlessly. So with over 10 years of experience in sales and more than 2 years in the EOR industry, he works closely with companies to ensure they can expand internationally, onboard talent efficiently, and remain compliant. So without the need for setting up local entities or juggling multiple third-party providers. So Landon will walk us through how an EOR solution can remove the burden of compliance, streamline hiring, and provide businesses with a more efficient way to scale across borders. So with that, Landon, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Paula, and again, thanks to Arjun. It was a great job for your section, so really appreciate you both setting this up. Okay, so thanks for the introduction. Love to go through this with everybody here. So compliance is a big thing, obviously, when we're talking about EOR. So EOR is a little bit different in this space. Again, pretty new industry. Really only been around the last 10 years or so. So, you know, Atlas has been around for just over 10 years as well. So we're one of the grandfathers in this space. The big thing, you know, difference, say it's like an ADP or something like that, which is, you know, a PEO. They would share liabilities with each other. So they would still be under the company name, but ADP would cover a lot of the aspects of HR and payroll and everything else, but it would still be the legal company name. EOR takes full responsibility for that. So they're 100% our employees. We assume responsibility for everything on the back end. So risk, compliance, payroll, taxation. We do the employment agreements for these employees. We administer benefits for these employees. You know, we help with visas. We help with a number of different things for these employees. And again, they are our employees, so it's a little bit different in the space as we're the employer of record. You guys would still dictate as a client, you know, any hiring, termination, compensation, what benefits you want to provide to these employees. We're pretty much like I guess we're the front of the house, you're still the back of the house. You tell us what to do, and we make sure that it's all nice and neat and legal and compliant. So that's kind of just the background of what EOR is. We operate in countries where you don't have a legal entity, but you want to expand internationally is how I usually say it. So I think that's a pretty good start, Paul, if you want to go to the next slide as we get into it. Yeah, so we operate, again, we're the only 100% direct EOR on the market. We operate in 163 countries, I think, globally at this point, always shifting. But again, we have 163 global locations. We have local presence in all our locations that we operate in. So it's not like, you know, if you want to operate in Argentina and you have, you know, support in Mexico or something like that, you have all localized support wherever we operate. So it's a big differentiator in this space in terms of how we help our clients get to market there and how we just go through with our support, right? It's an end-to-end service, very big white glove service, saving you time. We walk your hand through the entire process there. We can get most countries, generally speaking, off the top of my head, like 90% are good to go in about 2 weeks from signature of contracts. So it's nice and fast, right? You know, operating an entity, setting up an entity takes like 6 to 8 months on average. In some countries, you can go up to a year, like China. So it's really just we help you start there. Even if you're looking at an entity down the road, EOR is a great short-term solution, mediator solution to help you get to your goals, and how we can give you this global knowledge on how to operate an international workforce. I think that's good for that one, Paul. Unless anybody has any questions, please, again, happy to talk through them. Again, going through the journey, we are quite old in this space, and kind of how we got to where we are now. Our founder, Rick Hamill, he was actually working for another EOR provider. A third-party indirect EOR is how I say them without going into too much detail there. He identified a gap in the market. At this point, you know, with the direct versus the indirect, we own and operate all of our entities. It's all through Atlas ourselves. In an indirect model, there's a lot of third parties involved where, you know, they can outsource this part of the business, whether it's, you know, compliance or legal side, or they're going to outsource payroll there. They might not own the entity. There's a lot of different things that go in that space. So Rick saw a gap in this market, and he founded Elements Global Services in 2015. So as the first 100% direct EO on the market. It's on their first big clients in 2016. There's a couple different industries there, a big NGO as well. And then the next couple of years, we were just growing rapidly. Had a big major investment in 2020 with $20 million. Still growing into 2022, where we had a brand refresh to now what is known as Atlas. As soon as rebranding as Atlas, we had a large $200 million Series B funding, where we are now, and we've shown, again, at this point, we're in 163 countries. We've grown dramatically over the last couple of years. So that's just to give you a background. In this space itself, being around for 10 years, we're one of the earliest adopters. There's a lot of new players in this market that have been around for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So we've been around for 10 years. So we're one of the originals, and again, still the only 100% direct EOR model. So just to give you guys a little bit of a background. Again, in terms of like what makes Atlas different, we support 90+ languages, which is really big for some of our clients in multiple jurisdictions. 163 entities worldwide, and I think now our retention is 97%, if I'm not mistaken, from last year. So that is, yeah, it says plus, but I think that's more of an accurate number. So we are able, once we onboard our clients, to keep them happy. Again, even being on the sales side of things, I stay with my clients. Even they've signed a couple years ago, I'm still with them, and they're expanding or they need any help with direction, I'm always there for them as well. So it's a very big white glove service. We make sure that we have all hands on deck, multiple teams, to make sure that our clients get what they need. Again, we have that direct global foot. Okay. There might have been some more on there. I was just talking. I think that goes back to a lot of those things I'm saying. I mean, like, the biggest thing is, not only do our clients choose us, I know it says employer of choice, but we have very high satisfaction with our WSEs, which we call worksite employees. We try very, very, very hard to make it about them. And we like to be, as we refer to ourselves, people first organization as well. So that's great, Paul. You can go to the next one. That's good. In terms of the people first, what does that mean, right? Our teams themselves, there's no general, we have one if you have a quick question or anything like that. Everybody gets a dedicated team. We don't have a generic email or phone line where you have to answer every single question. You have a dedicated account manager, a dedicated manager for implementation of new employees, your HR, and then our big differentiator as well on this is our employee relationship consultants. So the employees have resources in every country that they're in. So a lot of my clients are in multiple countries. So say you have one in Chile, you have one in Ecuador, even though they're close, Belgium, Argentina. All those countries, they would have local support wherever they stand. So it's a big differentiator in this market. They have local support, local experts who are helping them with their questions, helping them with any legal, payroll, taxation questions. And they're all experts in their field. So that's a big thing as well. All of our own HR technology, our platform is all proprietary. Atlas developed it, Atlas owns it as well. So it's all our own systems on there. And then a big thing, we invest into our people. A lot of most of our ERCs and everybody on the support side have been here a long time. 3 years plus is very, very standard for most people on that team. And a lot of them have 7 to 10 years of experience in the HR field as well. So these are vets in the field. They're dedicated partner for the employees. They, again, local languages supported in region. It's really, really good for the employees. As great as it is for the clients, we want to make sure that your employees are happy as well. So really try to do that. I think that's good for that slide, Paul. Nobody's got any. I love a couple of these slides. I don't want to reiterate too much, but I'll kind of go through step by step because I do like some of these slides I didn't put in here. So what our customers have always said to us what they want, right? I mean, we can set up employees quickly. As I said, about 90% we can get done in 2 weeks. If we need to rush, I've had some exceptions before as well. They're all locally owned. They're all operated locally in 163 countries globally. You have localized expertise and resolution in the same time zone. So make sure that the compliance is as tight-knit as possible, as Arjun discussed there, and how a lot of the global things that we try to navigate. It's all our own proprietary software. It's all cloud-based processing. And then, the vendor consolidation and seamless integration. We have several integrations right now that we're working, which a lot of our competitors can't do. And we have a big roadmap coming by the end of Q2 is what I've been hearing now for a lot more. So like I'm working on a Dayforce integration right now, for example, that we're doing. So it's so there's a lot of different things that we've been doing, and we keep having more things that we can keep helping our clients with. So that's I think that's good for that one, Paula. Just want to make sure. You know, this one's great. Again, I do love to look at, you know, some case studies. This is the one we brought on last year. So Swaps Monitor, a company based in New York City, 50 plus employees, you know, now globally. They needed a solution. They've never used EOR before, and they provide 24/7 data services to global clients. So they really need to expand it outside the US. And they're very, very happy client, as we were able to increase their workforce by, I think, almost 30% at this point, as I just checked the platform, almost 20 employees now. They wanted some presence in the Philippines, in India, in Australia. And they've just been very, very happy with Atlas and how we've been able to help them take it to a global level. So they've been able to significantly increase their productivity, their workforce, and just be able to give back to their clients a lot without going to setting up an entity. We handle it all for them. So making sure that we enhance their data coverage, their customer support, and their global footprint. So that's a great client as well. And if anybody's interested after this, I have several of my clients that we can send you for a reference, or if you want any more information on any similar case studies that we've done here. So they're very happy with us, and that's a great one, as they never use EOR. A lot of times, you know, if you've never used EOR, Atlas it's a really great pull into the direct model, because we're a very big white glove service. We'll walk you through everything. We'll make sure that we take care of you, and we tell you whatever you need to know. So I think I try not to talk too fast, but I understand I'm pretty fast. So if anybody has any questions, any feedback, I'm always more than happy to hear that. There is my information as well. If anybody wants to take that down, send me an email with any questions. Happy to chat always, and I appreciate everybody hopping on and giving us your time today.
Great. Thank you, Landon, for the great insights there into how EOR can simplify global compliance. So at this point, we'll just have a quick look at the Q&A box to see if anything has come in. And also just I've added your information to the screen there. So if anybody has any queries or questions, they can reach out then to Landon directly. There is one there just from for Arjun. One question, if we have a few minutes just to cover it. So if you want to take this one, what are the biggest compliance risks US employers should be preparing for this year?
Good.
Sorry, I was waiting. Landon was speaking. I didn't want to interrupt. So yeah, that's a great question. We chatted a lot about that. So if I was going to pinpoint one thing, I'd probably say, like, obviously to do with compliance, worker classification, like they're going to make it more lenient, but I do think that since they're adding more investigators in there, that you really should make sure that your worker classification is all buttoned up. And it's the same with wage and hour and law compliance. There's a lot of changes with the FLSA that have happened recently since the Biden administration. They tried to lower the threshold, and then Trump may try increasing it. So really just making sure that everyone's classified correctly, being paid correctly, we're meeting the right exemption thresholds, that people who earn overtime are being paid overtime. I think those are probably the main things I see in terms of, because I do think there will be some audits going on, and to make sure that Trump knows that Trump makes people know that you know how he operates. He's want people to know that he's really in charge, and that there's that things are going on. So that's a big one. And obviously, as we discussed in pretty great detail, the DEI aspect is something to keep an eye on. There's a lot going on if you look at the news in terms of the challenges for DEI. So I'll keep an eye on that. Generally, especially if you deal with the federal government, but also look at the state level and see what's going on with that as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Arjun. Currently, I don't see any other questions in the chat, or there's a box as well as the Q&A box that you can add to. So at that, if you do have any questions, like I said, Landon's information is there. And once again, I just want to thank you all for joining us today. We really do appreciate your time and the engagement. Apologies for any issues there with logging on, and I can share the poll results as well following this as well. I think you'll be sent a survey if you have a minute just to fill that out. But we hope this session has provided valuable insights to help you navigate US compliance this year with confidence.